Chapter 1049. I haven't found anything yet. The scholar's expression was a bit stiff. This wasn't something to be happy about. Jintai slowly turned to the window and said indifferently, "Beiqi, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? If you can't even find out about this, I think you'd better give up your position as the emperor of the underworld to someone else." The meaning of his words couldn't be clearer. He clearly didn't believe the scholar's words. "I want to let you sit, do you dare?" The scholar snorted and also walked to the window. Standing side by side with Jintai, he said, "Don't talk nonsense. I don't have the mood to beat around the bush with you. It's not that I didn't try my best to find out the truth. It's just that I haven't found anything yet. The people involved in the matter are all dead, and some key figures even committed suicide. Don't you think it's strange?" Committed suicide. Jintai suddenly tilted his head and raised his sword-like eyebrows. "This matter is a bit strange and unpredictable. It seems that your control over the underworld is really not flattering. Someone actually dared to play this kind of trick under your nose. Haven't you found the mastermind behind it? You don't need to worry about my side. I know what I'm doing." The scholar put his hands on the window sill and looked at the fireflies shining in the forest. He said indifferently, "But you should investigate carefully on your side. There's one thing I need to remind you. This time, it's not only the army of dark and the father-in-law of your external affairs commander. There are also the subordinates of the king of Black Mountain. The three forces are led by Mu Bing. Mu Bing alone can't cause such a big wave. I'm afraid your external affairs commander isn't simple." The king of Black Mountain. Jintai's slender eyes flickered. He said, "I've heard of this person for a long time. I heard that he's very powerful. Haven't you investigated his background? He suddenly appeared many years ago. After swallowing several territories with thunderous means, he hasn't made any moves since. He's a bit mysterious." The scholar lightly patted the window sill and said indifferently, "The underworld is not like your immortal world. The more mysterious a person is, the more difficult it is to act rashly. But this time, he actually took the initiative to interfere with me. If I don't do something, it'll be a little unreasonable." Jintai nodded slightly and said, "The Black Mountain King, the Black Nether Army, and my external affairs great commander, These three groups of people actually wore the same pair of pants. What were they trying to do? You want to rebel?" As he spoke, he turned to Scholar and said, "Don't be in a hurry to make a move on this matter. Let's get to the bottom of this matter first. It's fine if we don't make a move, but once we do, we must eradicate the root of the problem. Don't leave any hidden dangers behind. Both of us should keep in touch with the progress of the matter." After he finished speaking, he turned into a streak of golden light and disappeared into the distant night sky. He left as soon as he finished what he had to do. He had no intention of staying for even a moment longer. In the surging immortal realm, amidst the vast and tumbling sea of clouds, there was a tall mountain that pierced the heavens like a sword. The mountain was extremely steep and there was no way to find it. It was surrounded by cliffs and precipitous cliffs. Ordinary people could only look up at it and sigh. More than half of the mountain peak abruptly emerged from the surging sea of clouds. One could see the tangled vines hanging down from the surrounding mountain walls. There was no lack of inspirational eagles building their nests on the high and dangerous mountain. A heavenly wind swept through the sea of clouds. As the vines swayed, a series of resounding eagle cries could be heard. Several eagles drilled out of their nests and soared against the strong wind. Behind the mountain wall, behind the swaying vines, 14 unforgettable and awe-inspiring words were carved vertically in 3 rows on the steep mountain wall. The words were each tens of feet in size. The heavenly wind still pushed the clouds away. Even the ancient vines that were as thick as a child's arm could not hide the true appearance of the words. The heavens are heartless, and the earth is heartless. I think of you, and I will also forget my feelings." The words were deeply embedded in the mountain and had been eroded by wind and rain. It was obvious that they had existed for countless years. Suddenly, the clouds gradually turned red. The rising sun jumped out of the distant sea of clouds in an instant, illuminating the heaven and earth. The sword-like mountain peak welcomed the first ray of morning light. A rainbow formed at a visible speed, from one end of the sea of clouds to the other end. It just happened to be stranded on the mountain peak that rose out of the sea of clouds. Such a beautiful scene was exceptionally spectacular and breathtaking. It was a wonder of heaven and earth that could not be replicated. This mountain was called the Grave of Love. It implied that it was a grave that buried love. It could be said to be famous in the celestial world. It was the solitary cultivation place of Wang Qing, the leader of the Heartless Palace, the #1 sect in the celestial world. In other words, only Wang Qing cultivated in the entire Grave of Love. The other people of the Heartless Palace did not dare to share it with him. Because under the cliffs of this mountain peak, not only love was buried, but also the bones of Wang Qing after he killed his wife and children and slaughtered hundreds of people in his family. How could the other disciples of the Heartless Palace cultivate in peace on this mountain? Even though this mountain was very big. A tall and thin man stood at the peak of the Grave of Love with his hands behind his back. His wide blue robe fluttered in the wind, and his unbound long hair fluttered behind him. It was like a dream, giving people the illusion that he was standing at the top of a rainbow. Behind him, there was a simple stone house built with a few pieces of stone. He wore a silver mask that covered his entire face. Only a pair of indifferent eyes could be seen in the two eye sockets. Facing the rising sun, he was not afraid of the glare and was still calm. At this moment, the silver mask reflected a magnificent color. It was dazzling, like a celestial being. Originally, there were no impurities on the smooth mask, but at this moment, because of the sunlight, 2 faint tear stains appeared under the eye sockets, extending all the way to the mouth. As a result, it gave people a strange feeling. It was as if this mask was crying silently in sadness and despair. It was unknown how such a strange mask was made. He was none other than the sect master of the #1 sect in the celestial realm, Wang Qing. He was also the powerhouse who founded the #1 sect in the celestial realm, Heartless Palace. He was able to cultivate in the place where hundreds of his family members were dumped for so many years, and still show such indifference in his eyes. It was clear that his mind was extraordinary. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe him as heartless. A ray of light suddenly pierced through the surging sea of clouds, scaring away a few soaring eagles. It landed directly behind Wang Qing, whose long hair and robe were fluttering in the wind. Mei He, the consecrator of Heartless Palace, appeared and bowed to Wang Qing. "Master." Wang Qing did not turn his head, nor did he make any sound. He silently endured the baptism of the wind and the sun, as if he did not notice Mei He's arrival at all. Mei He seemed to be used to all of this, and did not mind at all. After bowing respectfully, he summoned a dazzling snow-blue sword from his storage bracelet. The blue was so pure and thorough that its smooth surface faintly gave people a dazzling feeling of snow white. With one look, one could tell that it was an extraordinary treasure, but it was so huge that it could even be described as deformed. The width of the sword was even wider than the shoulders of Mei He, who stood side by side. The sword was more than 4 meters long, and the sword hilt was also a meter long. Altogether, it was a huge sword that was at least 5 meters long. Although the blade of the sword was unusually sharp, it could be used as a bed to sleep. The strangest part was the sword hilt. The way it was forged was not like a normal sword hilt. It was formed by 6 dragons that were as thick as a wrist, hollowed out and arched together. The 6 dragon heads bit to form a handguard, and the 6 dragon tails twisted together to form a sword tail. It was covered in dragon scales and looked lifelike. In this way, it prevented the sword hilt from being too thick, making it impossible for people to grasp it with one hand. It meant that one could grab a dragon from 6 directions at any time as the sword hilt. It could be seen that it was forged with great care. Although it was not Meihi's first time seeing this huge sword, his heart could not help but tremble when his eyes fell on it. He respectfully held the snow-blue huge sword with both hands and reported, "Master. The mythical fire palace sect leader Huoxiaozi personally forged this sword for Master. I have already retrieved it. However, this sword is too huge, so it might be a little inconvenient to use. It weighs 13,000 kilograms. In fact, all the disciples of the Heartless Palace were Wang Qing's disciples, including Grey Cloud Xane. Those disciples who received Wang Qing's teachings but did not reach a certain level of cultivation within a certain period of time were all killed by Wang Qing. Now, almost all the disciples in the Heartless Palace were the disciples of Grey Cloud Xane and the group of Grey Cloud Xane's disciples. This time, I owe Old Hua a big favor. Wang Qing finally spoke in an extremely calm voice. There was no fluctuation of emotion in his tone, as if he was reciting a paragraph word by word. Owe him a favor? I don't think so. Meihi smiled bitterly and said, "The Heartless Palace has been around for more than 50,000 years. Countless disciples have been sacrificed to collect the best blacksmithing metal in the 3 realms, the blue sea gold essence. There's a mountain of it, but he has squandered it to this point. Who knows if he has embezzled it or not? Not to mention the endless supply of treasures, we even gave him 3 trillion divine-grade spirit stones as wages, not a single piece less. How could we owe him a favor?" Wang Qing slowly turned around. The wind was still blowing, but at this time, his long hair and robe were motionless, not moving in the slightest. An indifferent gaze shot out from behind the mask, sweeping over the sword in Meihi's hands. His voice was calm as he said, "Good sword. Elder Hua's investment in this sword is far greater than what we have invested. Spending 30,000 years to forge this sword, it has far surpassed all of Old Hua's masterpieces. It can be said to be the culmination of his blood, sweat, and tears. The success of this sword has raised Old Hua's refining skills to another level. I'm afraid there is no treasure in the 3 realms that can withstand this sword's sharpness. It's so amazing." Meihi looked at the giant sword in his hand, which was bigger than a bed frame, incredulous. An unparalleled masterpiece comparable to a divine artifact, truly an amazing masterpiece. Wang Qing expressed his admiration in a calm tone. A majestic aura suddenly surged out from his body, engulfing the giant sword in Meihi's hand. A humming sound akin to a dragon's roar reverberated throughout the mountain peak, piercing one's eardrums. The sea of clouds at the foot of the mountain suddenly became turbulent. Meihi could clearly feel an incomparable excitement coming from the giant sword in his hand. It vibrated non-stop, as if a hidden dragon had awakened and was about to soar into the sky. Chapter 1050. In an instant, the feeling became reality. The giant sword that was 5 meters long slowly floated up from his hand. The sharp and piercing dragon roar became a continuous stream that surged through the sky and the sea of clouds. Countless gazes looked over from all the mountains under the sea of clouds. They did not know what was happening on the peak of the Love Mound above the clouds. This. Meihi looked at the giant sword, dumbfounded. He could clearly feel that the energy in his master's body had been withdrawn. The sword actually had a consciousness and floated up on its own. It was unbelievable. He thought it was an illusion. An unparalleled masterpiece, an amazing masterpiece. No wonder it is the artifact that Old Hua spent 30,000 years refining with countless treasures. Even though it was almost the highest level of praise, Wang Qing's gaze towards the sword was still faint. The giant sword slowly circled around Wang Qing that stood on the top of the mountain. The sword hummed like a dragon's roar. It was like a dragon that had been trapped for countless years had finally seen the light of day and its master. It also seemed to be praying for something. Artifact. How could Huashao be willing to hand over such a good thing? He looked at the giant sword that was filled with spirituality and gulped. He put himself in Huashao's shoes. If he had forged such a treasure, he would never have handed it over. Naturally, there are things that outsiders do not know. You do not need to know so clearly. A calm voice slowly came from behind the silver mask. One more thing is very important. Although this sword is good, it is only an unparalleled sword in the hands of others. It is far from the level of an artifact. It needs someone to activate it. It is a sword. It needs someone to activate it with a powerful sword essence to give it the life of an artifact. In terms of the strength of the sword essence, who else in the three realms but me can activate it? Sword essence. So that's how it is. I have learned. He bowed respectfully and stood up straight. He looked at the humming giant sword and said excitedly, Master, since the sword has been awakened by your sword essence, please give this sword a name. The giant sword seemed to understand his words. It flew faster around Wang Qing as if this was something it had been waiting for a long time. Wang Qing looked at the giant sword that floated in front of him from time to time. After a moment of silence, he calmly said word by word, I grant you the name, Six Dragon Snow Blue. Six Dragon Snow Blue. Every time the giant sword circled around to the front of Wang Qing, a syllable would come out of Wang Qing's mouth and hit the sword. 4 rounds. After withstanding 4 syllables, the giant sword suddenly erupted with a snow-blue light. It blossomed on the summit of the mountain. 6 rainbow-like giant flying dragons gradually appeared in the sky and became clearer and clearer. The 6 vigorous rainbow sky dragons shook their heads and wagged their tails as they chased after the dazzling meteor that shone with snow-blue light. They headed straight for the vast land. Suddenly, it gave people the illusion that the 6 rainbow heavenly dragons were holding a dragon pearl and flying down from the outer realm to the mortal world. The 6 giant rainbow sky dragons covered the sky and the earth with majestic sword essence and crashed into the peak of the Love Mound. All the disciples of the Heartless Palace turned pale with fright and did not dare to breathe. With a loud boom, the vast mountains trembled. The birds and beasts cried out in fear and fled in all directions. The 6 giant rainbow sky dragons instantly disappeared and burrowed into the Love Mound mountain. It was as if the Love Mound was a dragon nest and they had returned from their travels. All the disciples of the Heartless Palace followed the mountain. After the earth shook, some people looked at the Love Mound mountain and heaved a sigh of relief. After the dust settled, although the aura of the 6 rainbow sky dragons was shocking, it was fortunate that they did not damage the sacred mountain in everyone's hearts. However, this was only the result from one angle. It might not be the same result from another angle. The disciples at another angle suddenly exclaimed. Someone pointed at the Love Mound and cried out involuntarily, the mountain split open. A straight and smooth crack appeared in the middle of the mountain. From the peak to the foot of the mountain, although the crack was only 1 meter wide, it directly split the Love Mound into 2 halves. The disciples at the right angle could see a thread of light like a sliver of sky in the crack. They and the disciples at the other end of the sliver of sky exclaimed in shock, the mountain really split open. The mountain really split open. Quickly report to the elders, quickly report to the masters. Quickly report to the masters, don't make any noise. Do what you need to do. Meihi's majestic voice rolled from the peak to the surrounding mountains. Hearing his voice, the surroundings immediately became silent. On the peak, Meihi, who had finished scolding, looked at the crack that was 1 meter wide between him and his master. It happened to separate the two of them. His master was on one side and his disciple was on the other. Meihi took a few steps forward and looked down at the crack. He immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. If this unparalleled sword had directly flattened the entire mountain, he would not have been so shocked. What shocked him was that it had actually split such a huge mountain in half. The cut was smooth. Other than this 1-meter-wide crack, the entire mountain seemed to be undamaged. Although the mountain was tall, its rocks were brittle and hard. If it came into contact with a great force, it would be easy to shatter. However, the truth was right before his eyes. It was hard to believe. If it was a mountain piled up with mud, it would not be difficult to do so. May, he exclaimed, as expected of a divine weapon, as expected of a divine weapon. Its power alone is already so strong. If Master were to wield it, who in the world could be Master's match? That's not necessarily true. However, at least we have the power to fight back. We won't be helpless and waiting to be trampled upon. This sword just had to be completed at this time. It must be the will of the heavens. It looks like some things are predestined. If we can't avoid it, we can only face it. Wang Qing's tone was calm. He put down his hands that had been behind his back and threw out 2 jade archives from his wide sleeves. He said, "Destroy them after you read them." Yes. Mei's respectful demeanor was tinged with doubt. He did not know what his master wanted him to see. However, after he used his divine sense to examine them, his expression gradually turned serious. One of the 2 jade archives was sent by He Jingquang from the Ash Cloud sect. It recorded everything that had happened after he and Yu Qianqiu arrived in the underworld. It focused on analyzing the unknown events behind the assassination attempt on Yu Qianqiu. It clearly analyzed everything with reason and evidence. Although it was not a 100% conclusive conclusion, the words revealed an incomparably heavy plea for his master, Wang Qing, to make early preparations to prevent a major crisis that might occur. The other jade archive was a message sent by a disciple of the Heartless Palace from the underworld. It also mentioned what had happened in Twilight City. It stated that the assassination attempt on Yu Qianqiu was still a mystery, and that it needed further investigation before reporting. He clasped the 2 jade archives together and crushed them into powder with his palms, scattering them away with the wind. His expression was incomparably grave as he said, "I didn't expect the Immortal Palace to make a move against our Heartless Palace. High Deacon's analysis is correct. When Yu Qianqiu of the mystic Immortal City inexplicably came looking for you to cooperate, I was there as well. Yu Qianqiu's actions were indeed superfluous. I didn't expect there to be more than meets the eye. Master, we need to make early preparations. We cannot let the Immortal Palace have their way so easily. What's the rush?" Wang Qing slowly walked to the crack. He looked down and said calmly, "Whether it's true or not, before we are certain of victory, we will not make a move. Don't make a fool of yourself. The fate of Heartless Palace does not lie in how well prepared we are. It lies in the battle between me and Jin Tai." Chapter 1051. Although his tone was flat, the arrogance in it was obvious. He replied respectfully, "Yes." But he was excited and shocked. The meaning of his master's words was very clear. That was, with his master's current cultivation, only the immortal Emperor Jin Taikai was qualified to fight with him in the entire Immortal Palace. As for the others, they could not stop him at all, so there was no need for him to take them seriously. Wang Qing stretched out a wide palm towards the crack that had condensed into a claw. A snow-blue light buried at the bottom of the abyss shot out with a whoosh and flipped in the air above the mountain peak. With a clang, it decisively stabbed into the ground not far behind him. Although almost half of the sword body was inserted into the stone ground, there was still a large part of the sword exposed. The flowing snow-blue light had already disappeared, and under the sunlight, there was a bright spot on the mountain peak that was shining brightly. This 6-dragon snow-blue sword was quietly inserted into the mountain peak. From beginning to end, Wang Qing didn't touch it even once. In the next few months, he still didn't touch it even once. In fact, he rarely even looked at it. The man and the sword faced each other from a distance, only communicating with each other through their minds that outsiders could not see. It was not until a few months later when Wang Qing left the mountain that the six-dragon snow blue sword was pulled out of the mountain peak. If there is nothing else, you may leave. Wang Qing said indifferently. He seemed to remember something and took out a small red box. He held it with both hands and said, "Was Xiaozi wanted me to give this to master." Wang Qing did not ask what it was. He took the red box and held it in his palm in silence. After He left, he slowly opened it. The box was filled with snow-white silver sand. He tilted the box slightly, and the fine silver sand flowed out like water, drifting with the wind into the distance. Gradually, a snow-blue ring buried in the silver sand was revealed. He stretched out 2 fingers and picked up the ring. After the red box was abandoned, the silver sand rolled out and fell into the crack under his feet. This was a ring that was slightly wider than an ordinary ring. The material was obviously the same as the material used to forge the six-dragon snow blue sword. They were both rare blue sea gold essence in the 3 realms. There was a huge independent space in the ring, several times larger than the 10 spaces in an ordinary storage bracelet. However, this did not fail to attract Wang Qing's attention. His gaze landed on the inner surface of the ring. The 2 words Ruoyun were engraved on it, causing him to be unable to shift his gaze away for a long time. After a long time, Wang Qing sighed softly and said to himself, "Old Hua, are you reminding me to remember something?" Wu Xiong heaved a sigh of relief and thanked him profusely. Although it seemed like he was safe for the time being, his heart was still stretched taut. He was prepared to find a suitable opportunity to leave as soon as possible. He had just returned from the Immortal Palace when he saw this scene. His gaze fell upon the jade archive in Mu Tianjiao's hands. He sighed softly and said, "If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have had people deliver the news from the outside world to you every day." Mu Tianjiao raised her head with tears streaming down her face. She looked at him and choked with sobs. "You knew all along. News travels slower in the underworld than in the immortal realm. When the news spreads in the immortal realm." Wu Xiong walked up to her and patted her shoulder in consolation. "The news from the Immortal Palace arrived a few days earlier than you did. I've been thinking about how to break the news to you. I'm also very sad that something has happened to my father-in-law. However, the dead are dead, and the living have to look forward. My condolences, madam." As expected, he went to seek revenge on Yu Qianqiu. "I've been worried. I told him that he was no match for Yu Qianqiu, but he wouldn't listen." Mu Tianjiao suddenly stood up and grabbed Wu Xiong's hand. She lost control of her emotions and asked, "Who did it? Who killed my father? Those people had no grudge against my father. Why would they want to kill him? Was it Yu Qianqiu who did it?" Wu Xiong did not know how to answer her. The public news in Twilight City was that another group of people from the underworld had killed Mu Bing, but he knew in his heart that he was afraid that Mu Bing had not experienced such a big scene. He was afraid that he would be implicated if things got out of hand, so he found some reliable people to cooperate with Mu Bing. Those people would not kill Mu Bing at all. In fact, the people involved in this matter knew very well that at that time, Yu Qianqiu was outside the dungeon. There was no one else in the dungeon who would kill Mu Bing except for Yu Qianqiu. However, he could not say such words now. He only deeply regretted agreeing to Mu Bing in the first place. Wu Xiong looked at Mu Tianjiao and sighed slightly in his heart. The reason why he was jealous was that he really cared about this woman. Otherwise, he would not have done such an impulsive thing. According to the news from the other side, it should not be Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was locked up alone in a dungeon at that time. It is unlikely that he would have the opportunity to kill father-in-law. This has been confirmed by the army of Onyx. Wu Xiong said helplessly. But I saw the news that Yu Qianqiu broke out with my father's head. Mu Tianjiao went straight to the point and cried intermittently. Since he could break out of the dungeon, it means that the dungeon could not trap him. It means that he had the opportunity to kill my father. What's more, he has the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in his hand. He can command the army of Onyx. Who knows if the army of Onyx is cooperating with him to put on a show? This woman was as smart as ever. She saw the suspicious point at once. Wu Xiong sighed in his heart. He really did not know what to say. He could only grab her hand and comfort her. Don't worry. The truth will come to light one day. He originally wanted to say something about punishing the culprit, but when he thought of the terrifying Emperor of the Underworld standing behind Yu Qianzhou, he really did not know if he would have the opportunity to settle the score with Yu Qianzhou. After a period of sadness, Mu Tianjiao wiped away her tears and revealed the strong expression that she had when she was supporting the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. She directly knelt before Wu Xiong. Wu Xiong was startled and quickly helped her up. "Madam, what are you doing?" Seeing that she could no longer kneel, Mu Tianjiao said decisively, "My abilities are really limited, and I'm really powerless to do anything about the netherworld. I beg the great commander to help me find my father's body in the netherworld and bury it." This. Wu Xiong seemed to be in a difficult position. Mu Tianjiao bit her lip. "If it is really difficult, then forget it." Sigh. Wu Xiong let out a long sigh. He took out a box made of jade from his storage bracelet and gently placed it on the stone table. He said helplessly, "The people of the Dark Nether Army have searched for father-in-law's body, but they couldn't find it. Instead, Yu Qianzhou asked the people of the Heartless Palace to deliver father-in-law's head. It's inside." He was not lying. At that time, Lu Lin of the Onyx Army had considered that Mu Bing was the father-in-law of Wu Xiong, the great commander of external affairs of the Immortal Palace, and had really sent people to the collapsed ground to search for Mu Bing's body. In fact, no one knew that Mu Bing had been dragged several hundred meters underground by Yu Qianzhou and killed. His headless corpse had been cut into pieces and buried deep underground. Naturally, it was impossible to find him at such a depth of several hundred meters. Mu Tianjiao opened the jade box with trembling hands. Mu Bing's twisted head was lying inside. It was obvious that he had suffered a lot before his death. Fortunately, the corpse of an immortal wouldn't rot so easily in a short period of time. Otherwise, it would be impossible to see who it was. Mu Tianjiao's tears fell silently again. She bit her lips until blood came out and forcefully controlled her emotions. She stared at the bloody and empty eyes on Mu Bing's head and said, "My father didn't have that much of a grudge with those people. They didn't have to kill him, chop off his head, and gouge out his eyes. If they didn't have a deep grudge, they wouldn't have done such a thing." Chapter 1052. Mu Tianjiao's trembling hand reached into the box and touched Mu Bing's cheek. When her finger swept past the blood-stained right eye socket, she said in a trembling voice, "This is a sword wound. When that person used a sword to gouge out my father's right eye, he must have said, 'Arrogant.'" When her finger slid down to the blood-stained left eye socket, she murmured, "He must have said," looking down on others. She already had a vague outline of her father's murderer in her mind. Based on her understanding of that person, she guessed that the words he said were roughly the same as what the murderer himself had said during the torture. She slowly lifted Mu Bing's head and was about to hold it in her arms when she suddenly discovered that there was a wound on Mu Bing's lips. If she hadn't accidentally discovered it, she wouldn't have noticed it. It was covered by the blood on his lips. She opened Mu Bing's mouth with trembling hands and immediately smelled a strong, slightly rancid smell of blood. She saw that in the empty mouth, his tongue had been crushed, and not a single tooth could be found intact. The sack was a ball in his mouth. It was obvious that someone had stabbed a sword into his mouth and tortured him. Mu Bing, who was standing to the side, was also slightly shocked. He didn't expect that there was such a secret in his mouth. He didn't know what Mu Bing had said to provoke Yu Qianqiu to do such a cruel thing. His head was chopped off, his eyes were dug out, and his tongue was crushed. Ah! Mu Tianzhao suddenly cried out in pain and fainted on the spot. Wu Xiong was shocked and quickly supported her. He pressed a palm on her head to dispel the anger in her heart. After a while, she finally woke up and said anxiously, "My condolences, madam. We will take revenge sooner or later. Don't damage your health because of anger." Mu Tianzhao lay in his arms, tears streaming down her face as she smiled bitterly. "I told you that this person wasn't simple, and he had no enmity with us. I told you not to go against him, but why didn't you listen to me? If you hadn't chased him to the underworld, you wouldn't have been killed." Wu Xiong grabbed Mu Bing's head from her bosom and put it back into the jade box. He frowned and said, "From Madam's words, could it be Yu Qianqiu's doing? It's clear that there's a deep hatred between them to do such a thing. Father has you backing him up. Even if he had enemies in the past, most people wouldn't dare to do anything to him now, let alone go to the underworld to kill him. Among Father's enemies, Yu Qianqiu is the only one who has the ability to commit murder in the netherworld. Yu Qianqiu is a vindictive person. Who else could it be but him?" Mu Tianzhao deduced and locked onto the real culprit. "So Yu Qianqiu is a despicable person in her heart, looks like I misunderstood her." Wu Xiong looked at her speechlessly. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, "Don't worry. Could it be that he scared himself when he took out the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld?" Thinking of this, the scholar felt that it was highly possible. He couldn't help but smile faintly and said, "Did you find any signs of where they were going?" They were very careful in the Netherworld River. They tried their best to avoid places with people or many people. They kept going against the current and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. "Before we came, we received a message from our friends from the Netherworld River's water tribe. They said that they would probably enter the endless horizon along the Netherworld River in a few days," the 1,000 soldiers in silver armor said. "Endless horizon? What are they going to do there?" the scholar asked in surprise. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor spread out his hands helplessly and said, "They are so sneaky. I don't know what they are going to do." For a moment, the two famous big shots in the Netherworld couldn't figure out what they were doing. The scholar put down the pen in his hand and walked around the table in the attic. Suddenly, he stopped at the window and said, "1,000 soldiers, ask your friends from the Netherworld River's water tribe to keep a close eye on them. Tell them to contact me at any time. I'm going out for a while." After saying this, he turned into a white light and flashed across the pitch-black night sky at an incredible speed. He quickly disappeared into the distant horizon. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor was stunned. He didn't have the time to say, "Yes." He looked at the words written on the table and pinched his chin as he said suspiciously, "Destiny, heaven's law. It doesn't seem like they are expressing their feelings. Why did they give the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld to Yu Qianqiu and then pursue it? What does he want?" Shaking his head, he couldn't figure it out. Then, he also flashed out. Just as the two big shots in the Netherworld Royal Palace said, there was indeed an escaping clam in the Netherworld River. It was a huge clam that had lived for millions of years. With 2 people in his stomach, Shin Yu kept dodging in the Netherworld River. Since he knew that the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in Yu Qianqiu's hand was fake, he was more afraid than Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xane. What kind of person was the Emperor of the Netherworld? The Emperor could kill him with a flick of his finger. His millions of years of experience told him that it was not shameful to be humble and cowardly. It was best to stay alive. In his smooth stomach, Yu Qianqiu used the meatball in his stomach as a pillow and slept soundly. In the beginning, he pretended to be calm and pretended to sleep. But in the end, he got over it. Anyway, what was going to happen would happen. He would deal with it as it came. It was useless to worry. He had to deal with it calmly. As soon as his tense nerves relaxed, he really fell asleep. He even snored from time to time. He slept like a log. It had been a long time since he had such a relaxed sleep. He didn't know where he was in his dreams. Sometimes, he dreamed that he was caught by the subordinates of the Emperor of the Netherworld. But when he was locked in a cage, he found that he was in a prison in his previous life. There were prison guards in uniform walking around in front of him. So, he asked the prison guard to get him a cigarette. The prison guard was wearing a big cap, but he said in Grey Cloud Xan's voice, "Do you want me to choke you to death with the smoke?" He immediately cursed loudly. As he was cursing, he was suddenly escorted out of the prison. As a result, he found that he had been escorted into a magnificent palace by the police. The scholarly emperor of the underworld stood high above him, smiling sinisterly at him and baring his hideous fangs, as if he was about to skin and swallow him alive. He tried his best to see the other party's face clearly, but it was blurry and he couldn't see it clearly. In the end, he didn't care anymore and teleported back to Utopia. He realized that he was driving a sports car on the highway. He was driving Ji Woo, who was dressed in sexy clothes. He told Ji Woo arrogantly, "We've taken out the money we left in the Swiss bank. We can live comfortably for the rest of our lives." Suddenly, dark clouds appeared in the sky. Grey Cloud Xan's old face suddenly appeared in the sky. He stared at them in the car and snorted coldly, "Do you want money or your life?" He looked like he was robbing them. The most terrifying thing was that Ji Woo suddenly turned around to look at him. She had a beautiful face, but she said in the same voice as Grey Cloud Xan, "Do you want money or your life?" In the end, he woke up with a start. He suddenly sat up and looked at his surroundings. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief and fell back down. He waved his hand at Grey Cloud Xan, who was staring at him with a twitching expression. "Old song. I had a nightmare just now. You were talking everywhere in the dream. It gave me a fright." "Nightmare?" "You smiled and asked for cigarettes, and you withdrew money from Switzerland to live comfortably. You call that a nightmare?" Grey Cloud Xan said with a mocking expression. He couldn't help but exchange a few words with Yu Qianqiu, who was talking in his sleep. "Ah!" Yu Qianqiu immediately jumped up like a spring. He pointed at Grey Cloud Xan and exclaimed, "How did you know? You even know about Switzerland? F***ck. Did you transmigrate here too?" "Transmigrate here? I flew here, okay." Grey Cloud Xan sneered and said, "You talk a lot in your sleep. It's hard for me not to know. I say, you're really broad-minded. You're already in this state, yet you can still sleep and have sweet dreams." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He had been talking in his sleep. He could talk in his sleep. He was slightly shocked. He didn't say any secrets that couldn't be exposed, right? It seemed like he couldn't sleep in front of strangers anymore. It was too dangerous. He wanted to ask Grey Cloud Xan what else he had said. Suddenly, Shen Yu's voice came. "Everyone, be careful. We're about to enter the Netherworld River in the endless horizon." Chapter 1053. The two who were bickering pricked up their ears at the same time to listen to the movements outside. They looked at each other and saw the nervousness in each other's eyes. They stopped talking, afraid that something unexpected would happen. However, they seemed a little lost amidst their nervousness. Did they reach the endless horizon so smoothly? According to Shen Yu, the Netherworld River was the same as the land. It was also ruled by powerful factions. The long journey was full of danger, and accidents could happen at any time. The two were mentally prepared for the worst. However, what made them feel strange was that they reached the endless horizon without any danger. Someone even slept the entire way. Compared to Shen Yu's explanation, the two felt that it was a little unbelievable. In fact, even Jiu himself felt a little baffled, let alone the two of them. Since when had the Netherworld River Basin become so peaceful? Where did all those fellows who blocked the road, robbed, killed, bullied the weak, and committed all sorts of crimes go? Everything had its cause and effect. In fact, Shinyu's cautiousness, or rather timidity, and familiarity with this route were also objective reasons for being able to reach this place smoothly. Most importantly, due to the intervention of the Netherworld Emperor's guards, the Silver Armor Army, the Silver Armor Army's friends in the Netherworld River were not weak either. With these powerhouses' forces secretly monitoring their journey, those who had ill intentions along the way would dispel their evil thoughts after discovering them. This was equivalent to providing protection for them in disguise. This was the real internal reason. Yu Qianqiu and Sungyin Xan held their breaths and listened attentively to the movements outside. It would be a lie to say that they did not want to go out and take a look. Even the Netherworld cultivators did not dare to step into the punishment land of the Netherworld, let alone the people from the immortal world. The two of them wanted to see the true appearance of the endless horizon. With this experience, it would be an enviable qualification to show off. However, no one had the guts to go out and take a look. Endless horizon. Those who heard this name for the first time would probably associate it with darkness. In fact, in a place as dark as the Netherworld, there was probably no place brighter than it. It was definitely not a lie. Almost half of the vast endless horizon was fused with the bright and wriggling red light, and it was steaming hot. Coming here, one would realize that one was like a freshly baked bun. On a narrow section of the Netherworld River, red light enveloped the river, dyeing the entire river red. On both sides of the river Styx, there was a row of soldiers in red armor. Their clothes and armor were bright red, and each of them gave off a vicious aura, as if they had charged out from blood and fire. He was from the river Styx, so the Purgatory army would not do anything to him. However, when he slowly approached the soldiers in front of him, his stomach still palpitated with fear. Hence, he forced himself to calm down and asked with a smile, "I'm from the water tribe of the Netherworld River. I wonder if you can make way for me and let me pass." A red-armored soldier floating in the water slowly floated forward and pushed his palm to stop him. "We're pursuing a fugitive. Regardless of whether you're in the sky or in the water, you have to be checked. If there's nothing wrong, we'll naturally let you pass." Zhou Yu was stunned. He plucked up his courage and asked, "You're from the land. Since when did you have the right to set up a checkpoint in the river Styx to check the river Styx? That's not something you should worry about. We've naturally informed the overlord of this water body." The red-armored soldier pointed at Zhou Yu's huge body in the water and said, "I see that your clam is huge. It's big enough to hide a few people inside. Please open it and let us search. If there's nothing wrong, we'll immediately let you pass." Zhou Yu was speechless, but he did not dare to open the clam for them to search. While he was panicking and hesitating, the red-armored soldier suddenly shouted, "Cooperate quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for using force." The two people hiding in the clam looked at each other. They had clearly heard the movements outside. Although the people searching outside did not say who the fugitive was, the two of them felt that they were the ones being captured. "Old song. You're an expert. What do you think we should do?" Yu Qianqiu humbly asked with telepathy. "You respect me as an expert now." Grey Cloud Axion rolled his eyes, but now was not the time to fight. He replied telepathy, "With Zhou Yu's cultivation, if anything happens, we won't be able to break out. Hiding outside is not a solution. If anything happens, are you confident that you can help me and Zhou Yu break out?" Yu Qianqiu asked cautiously with telepathy. Grey Cloud Axion thought for a while and slowly replied, "I can't say for sure since I can't see the situation outside. But I'm sure there are many experts in Purgatory. Plus, the endless sea is vast. Even if I can break out for a while, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist a large number of experts." If I'm alone, maybe it won't be difficult to break out. Maybe they're not here to capture us, old song. Just be prepared for the worst. After Yu Qianqiu said that, he suddenly patted Xin Yu and said in a clear voice, Xin Yu, open it and let us out. Jiu Yu, who was in a dilemma, opened the giant shell. 2 people flashed out. Jiu Yu also turned into human form. The 3 of them stood side by side. Yu Qianqiu looked back and forth, then cupped his hands towards the red-armored soldier who came out of the formation, and said with a smile, I wonder what happened that caused the Purgatory Army to make such a big fuss. The man glanced at Sangyin Axayan and Yu Qianqiu and said, 2 criminals have escaped from the endless horizon. We are currently searching for them. Then he pointed at the 2 and said, I think the 2 of you are very suspicious. Please come back with us for a while. If there's nothing, we will let you go. So the criminals escaped from the endless sea. Hearing this, the 3 looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief. It has nothing to do with us. Yu Qianqiu immediately laughed. General, I think you're mistaken. We are from the celestial world. We can't be criminals that escaped from the endless sea. Take a closer look. The red-armored soldier covered up the loophole in his words without hesitation. Some of the criminals in the endless sea are from the celestial world. The 2 escaped criminals are from the celestial world. Such a coincidence. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Then he smiled bitterly. General, we can cooperate with you. But how long will it take? Why ask so many questions? You'll know when you get there. The red-armored soldier snorted. Don't make us use force. The 3 looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu had no choice but to take 1 step at a time. He said to Jiu Yu, this is none of your business. Wait for us in the river Styx. Jiu Yu nodded and watched the 2 of them leave with the red-armored soldiers. Suddenly, Xin Yu looked around and immediately realized that something was wrong. The red-armored soldiers that were blocking his way had all left. He could leave at any time, not to mention him, even Greycloud Axayan and Yu Qianqiu, who had leapt out of the water along with the red-armored soldiers, exchanged a glance and also realized that something was wrong. It didn't make sense for the fugitives to retreat just because they encountered the 2 of them, right? The 2 of them immediately became vigilant. The heat wave that came toward them, the dark sky was almost dyed red. The red-hot mist that rose from both sides of the river, and the miserable screams that came from afar made the 2 of them even more afraid. A burly man with a red iron chain wrapped around his upper body stood on the shore of the river Styx, looking at them like a mountain. Both of their gazes were focused on him. This man can't be underestimated. He has the cultivation of the middle stage of the underworld emperor. I'm afraid he will be a difficult character to deal with, Jiu Yu said secretly. Needless to say, Yu Qianqiu couldn't move his eyes away when he saw the man with the red iron chain wrapped around his upper body. He was a bit surprised. He immediately recalled the wall carvings in the underground palace when he first met the saintess of the underworld in the East Holy Land. Besides the carvings of the underworld emperor who was dressed like a scholar, there were also carvings of the 12 underworld generals on both sides of the wall. One of them looked exactly like this man, even their expressions were very similar. Thinking of what Sangyin Axayan had just said, Yu Qianqiu immediately let out a breath of cold air, and he secretly sent a voice transmission, you guessed right, this person is indeed difficult to deal with. If I'm not wrong, this person is one of the 12 netherworld generals that shake the netherworld. Old song. Why do I feel that something is amiss? Could it be that he was sent here to deal with you? One of the 12 underworld generals? Jiu Yu was shocked. Even though he hadn't seen these 12 figures before, he had heard about them. They were the famous old experts of the underworld. They were already experts in the middle stage of the underworld emperor more than 100,000 years ago. Their outstanding military exploits were enough to intimidate the heroes of the underworld. They were the 12 most capable generals of the Underworld Emperor Bai Qi. They had even followed the Underworld Emperor Bai Qi to fight the infamous Thousand Swords Demon Monarch. Those who survived the battle and escaped alive were even more extraordinary. An ordinary expert in the middle stage of the Underworld Emperor couldn't compare to them. How do you know he is one of the 12 Underworld generals? Have you seen him before? Sungyin Aksayan secretly transmitted his voice, but his gaze never left that person. That person's gaze, which seemed to be solid, rapidly pressed towards his gaze. His ferocious aura, which had been through a long period of slaughter, forced Sungyin Aksayan to not dare to look directly at that person. He quickly shifted his gaze. Yu Qianqiu replied secretly, I have seen the portraits of the 12 underworld generals of the underworld before. This man is one of them. Zhou Yu and Yu Qianqiu looked left and right at the red-armored soldiers who had come out of the underworld river. He said secretly, they actually send out the underworld generals to investigate. I'm afraid there is something fishy about this. The two of them were still standing there, whispering to each other. The man who had been talking to Yu Qianqiu in the water had already dashed to the side of the ferocious man who had red iron chains wrapped around his upper body. He reported something. The ferocious man said in a deep voice, bring him here. Yu Qianqiu and Zhou Yu were immediately chased over by the group of red-armored soldiers. They stood in front of the ferocious man. The ferocious man ignored Zhou Yu and stared at Yu Qianqiu, sizing him up. Yu Qianqiu's heart thumped, his stomach grumbled, and he cursed his ancestors in his heart. Zhou Yu, who was at the side, frowned slightly. After some hesitation, he cupped his fists and said, I am the great consecrator of the celestial realm's passionless palace, Zhou Yu. May I ask if you are one of the Underworld Emperor's 12 underworld generals, the red-armored war army? The ferocious man was slightly stunned. He looked a little surprised when he turned to look at Zhou Yu, as if he didn't expect Zhou Yu to recognize him. He shouted in a deep voice, my war army has lived in the savage lands for a long time. Back then, I had only met Wang Qing of the Passionless Palace. I have never heard of any great consecrator or little consecrator. Why have you barged into my endless horizons? Could it be that you have some ulterior motives? Chapter 1054. Damn it! Aren't you accusing us wrongly? Who would want to come to your endless netherworld horizon? It was you who forced us out of the river Styx, and now it's us who are up to no good. Yu Qianqiu was speechless, but he couldn't figure out this legendary figure's temper, so he didn't dare to be too presumptuous. The two uneasy fellows looked at each other. The other had already admitted that he was the underworld general under the underworld emperor, the red armor warrior. But what puzzled the two was that the other didn't know who Sungyin Aksayan was. Didn't that mean that the other didn't know what happened in Twilight City? It seemed that the other didn't set up this checkpoint to target them. Yu Qianqiu immediately wanted to test him. He cupped his fists and bowed, saying, I am Yu Qianqiu, the head of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. We are just passing through here on the river Styx. We definitely have no bad intentions. Please let us go, General. He wanted to see if the other had heard of him. If not, it would be easy to deal with him. The red armor warrior snorted, even a nobody from the immortal world dares to come here. How dare you say you don't have bad intentions? Guards! Arrest them and interrogate them. The red armor warriors surrounding the two immediately obeyed. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, saying, wait. The other party didn't know him, so he wasn't afraid. He took out a black token and showed it to the red armor warrior, saying, who dares to touch me? Open your eyes and see what this is. Seeing him take out a fake underworld emperor's token, the corner of Sungyin Aksayan's mouth twitched, but he naturally wouldn't expose it. Underworld emperor's token. The red armor warriors were moved when they saw the thing in his hand, and they were about to pay their respects. However, the red armor warrior waved his hand to stop them. He stared at the token in Yu Qianzhou's hand and said disapprovingly, I have followed the underworld emperor for so many years, and I have never heard of him giving the token to an outsider, let alone a small immortal world cultivator like you. Why do I feel that there is something wrong with this underworld emperor's token? The more I look at it, the more it looks like a fake. Zhang Yunxian's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This red-armored soldier was indeed a trusted subordinate of the Emperor of the Underworld. He could immediately tell that the token of the Emperor of the Underworld was fake. This was going to be a big problem. How could the other side let go of the person who faked the token of the Emperor of the Underworld? Grey Cloud Xian's right hand had already touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist, just in case. Bullshit. Yu Qianzhou almost panicked. He didn't expect the other party to say that. Although he had fooled Zhang Yunxian and Xin Yu by saying that the token of the Underworld Emperor was fake in order to avoid their suspicion, he knew that the token of the Underworld Emperor was given to Yu Ji by the Saintess of the Underworld herself. It couldn't be fake. General. You can't speak carelessly. This is the genuine token of the Emperor of the Netherworld. How can you fake it? You better look carefully before you speak. Otherwise, it will be a great disrespect to the Emperor of the Netherworld. Yu Qianzhou shouted. At this moment, Zhang Yunxian only wanted to say 5 words to him, stubborn. There's no need to argue whether it's real or fake. I have someone here who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in your hand is real or fake. The red-armored soldier looked at him disdainfully and sneered. Take the 2 of them away. Wait. Yu Qianzhou shouted. You really don't know your place. Do you still want to resist? The red-armored soldier's gaze turned cold. We can go with you to verify whether it's real or fake. What if it's real? Yu Qianzhou was very confident. If the token in his hand was real, there was no need to be afraid. You dare to bargain with me? You must be tired of living. If you have the real token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in your hand, no one will dare to do anything to you. You can do whatever you want in the endless horizon. According to the red-armored soldier's temper, he wouldn't be so patient. He would have captured the 2 of them and interrogated them. However, he was here under orders to put on a show, so he couldn't do anything. Okay. Yu Qianzhou shouted. I'll go with you. I want to see who has the guts to distort the truth and say that the token in my hand is fake. Take them away. The red-armored soldier shouted. Wait. Yu Qianzhou tried to delay again. This time, the red-armored soldier's expression was really bad. No one dared to disobey him again and again. He immediately said in a deep voice, What do you want again? I have a friend in the Netherworld River. I have to bring him along. Yu Qianzhou didn't care whether he agreed or not. He turned and shouted at the surface of the Netherworld River, Zhou Yu, come out. Zhou Yu heard their conversation clearly from below. He flashed out of the Netherworld River with a pale face. He had no choice. There was a restriction on his body. He had to follow even if he didn't want to. Actually, Yu Qianzhou didn't want Xin Yu to take the risk either. However, the green fire pearl had been planted in Xin Yu's body. If the 2 of them were placed too far apart, it wouldn't be a problem for a short period of time. However, if the 2 of them were placed too far apart, they would immediately lose control and Xin Yu would definitely die. He didn't know where the red-armored soldier would take them to verify the authenticity of the Netherworld Emperor's token. He decided to bring Zhou Yu along for the sake of safety. Just like that, the 3 of them were surrounded by the Purgatory Army and flew to the depths of the Netherworld River. Along the way, Grey Cloud Xian couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianzhou, the token in your hand is obviously fake. You still dare to follow them? Once the matter is exposed, we will be trapped in the depths of the endless sea cliff. It will be even more difficult for us to escape. What are you trying to do? Don't worry. The quality of the Netherworld Emperor's token is very high. Unless it's the Netherworld Emperor himself, no one will be able to tell it's real. I don't believe that anyone would dare to attack someone with the Underworld Emperor's command medallion without knowing if it's real or fake. How about it? You can rest assured, Yu Qianqiu said confidently. I hope so. Grey Cloud Xian could only sigh. He felt like he was stuck in a quagmire and couldn't get out of it. However, he had already made up his mind. Once he was at death's door and had nowhere to run, he would kill Yu Qianqiu first to avenge his grandson and himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to die in peace. After coming to the Netherworld, they had long heard of the endless sea cliff. Unfortunately, they didn't have the chance to see it. Even Zhou Yu only dared to look at it secretly from the Netherworld River. Now that they were overlooking the endless sea cliff from the sky, the three of them were still shocked and terrified. So this was the true face of the endless sea cliff. Scorching red molten lava continuously bubbled up from the ground like a spring, slowly flowing in all directions on the vast land. It was such a shocking scene. The lava field that was as wide as the sea was dyed red and had been rising for many years. Under the red mist, there were crisscrossing paths on the lava field like fields. I-oh! I-oh! The sorrowful and miserable voices of men and women mixed together and echoed endlessly. Countless men and women were completely naked, stepping on the scorching ground barefoot like slaves, working together to pull the huge iron chains on their shoulders and hands. The other end of the iron chains dragged something that looked like a sieve, filtering something that had gushed out of the ground along with the lava. There were many soldiers of the Purgatory Army in the surroundings who were holding long whips that were covered in thorns. Once they discovered someone slacking off, they would lash out with a hoot sound. Along with the laceration of flesh, miserable screams would resound. The slaves who had been whipped and were physically weak were immediately whipped into the boiling lava by the long whips. They wailed and screamed incessantly in the lava, and their bodies sank into the lava while emitting black smoke. A soldier in charge of law enforcement took out a Wuling mirror and shone a beam of white light at the corpses that had sunk into the lava. Immediately, a ray of green light entered the mirror. This kind of scene could be seen at any time during the flight, causing Yu Qianqiu and the other two to feel their blood run cold. In the vast lava field, there were also hills and mountainous areas. When they flew over, they could see countless naked men and women mining in the open in the mountains. Similarly, they could also see soldiers carrying long whips mercilessly executing people. Miserable screams still lingered in their ears. What was even more eye-opening was that they could occasionally see neatly dressed women being dragged and thrown into the mountains by the Purgatory Army. It was obvious that they had just been caught after committing some crime. Once such women were thrown, the busy male slaves in the surroundings immediately stopped what they were doing and swarmed over. Amidst the women's screams, their ragged clothes were torn to shreds, and they were stripped in the blink of an eye. A group of dirty men were no different from beasts. They held down the fair-skinned women and rushed to rape them one after another. No one knew how long this would last. What was strange was that the Purgatory soldiers, who were supposed to be strict in law enforcement, turned a deaf ear to them and allowed these men to do as they pleased. It inevitably made people feel that this was the time for these male slaves to rest. The unimaginable scenes they saw along the way made the three of them shudder with fear. The soldiers of the Purgatory Army did not treat the prisoners here as humans at all. In their eyes, they were no different from beasts and pigs. They endlessly tortured the prisoners using all kinds of strange methods, turning this place into a living purgatory that was too horrible to look at. One thing was obvious. Those naked slaves either had their cultivation sealed or had their cultivation crippled. They were forced to do all kinds of heavy labor with their pure physical strength. Also, the lava that emerged from the ground had a suppressive effect on meditation cultivators. It was easy to imagine the suffering they had to endure in such an environment. Shin Yu's uncomfortable expression as he flew in the air due to the high temperature. However, what made the three of them feel strange was that these purgatory soldiers were also meditation cultivators, but they did not seem to be affected by the lava at all. The three of them easily suspected that the red armor they were wearing could help them resist the torture of the lava. After flying for half a day, a towering mountain stood like a ferocious giant beast in the red light of the lava in the distance. Flying closer to take a look, the laborers at the foot of the mountain were as dense as ants. Clanking sounds could be heard incessantly, as if they were forging something. In between, the familiar sound of caltrops and whips could be heard incessantly, and screams could be heard one after another. There were countless caves on the mountain with red-armored soldiers going in and out. The whole mountain was like a nest of red ants. As the three of them were observing carefully, the red-armored soldier had already flown to the top of the mountain, where there was a magnificent palace. The others followed closely and landed on the square in front of the palace. Standing on the top of the mountain and looking around quietly, they saw a sea of red light and a red fog rising noisily into the sky, looking magnificent. The miserable screams that kept coming from the foot of the mountain allowed the three of them to understand the meaning of this endless horizon. They understood why the Netherworld's punishment grounds could cause the Netherworld's cultivators to keep quiet out of fear. Presumably, no one would be willing to be sent here. The red-armored soldier glanced at the three of them and then looked at the roof of the palace. The three of them couldn't help but look at the roof. They saw a man dressed like a scholar in white standing on the roof with his hands clasped behind his back and bare feet, motionless with his back to the people on the square and his face to the vast red lava world. The red light filled the sky, and his white robe fluttered in the wind. The three of them were stunned. Even though they had never seen the Emperor of the Underworld with their own eyes, they had heard that the Emperor of the Underworld liked to dress like a scholar in white for a long time. At this moment, they saw a scholar in white standing so leisurely on the roof of a palace in the endless horizon. It was self-evident what it meant. Could this man be the legendary Supreme Master of the Underworld who rarely came out, the Emperor of the Underworld? The three of them felt short of breath. It felt unreal, and they didn't know if they were lucky or unlucky. Yu Qianqiu found that the back of this scholar in white was exactly the same as the back of the scholar he had seen in the wall sculpture in the underground palace in the Holy Land, where he had seen the saintess of the underworld for the first time. It was also the back of the scholar, as if the scholar in the wall sculpture had suddenly walked out of his mind. Under such circumstances, the three of them were certain without a doubt that this scholar in white with his back facing them was the Underworld Emperor who had awed the three realms, the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. Grey Cloud Axayan and Yu Qianqiu suddenly remembered what the red-armored soldier had said earlier. I have someone here who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in your hands is real or fake. The two of them instantly felt bitter when they thought about it. So the person he had mentioned was the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. They had found the right person. Grey Cloud Axayan and Shin Yu slowly turned their heads to look at Yu Qianqiu, their eyes filled with despair. Chapter 1055. Yu Qianqiu choked and was speechless. It was said that those who had nothing to lose were not afraid of those who wore shoes, and this was used to describe those ruffians. However, if they knew that there was a hard and sharp nail in front of them, which ruffian would still dare to step on it? Zhou Yu lowered his head sadly. He had been cautious all his life. A small mistake had caused him to be doomed eternally. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Tsungyan Axian wanted to say something but stopped himself. He knew that it was meaningless for him to intervene. With Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi here, he had no hope of protecting Yu Qianqiu. Back then, the sect master's 3-in-1 sword-drawing technique could not deal with immortal Emperor Jin Tai, and Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi was definitely not weaker than immortal Emperor Jin Tai. How could he deal with him? He could only take one step at a time. If he was really in a desperate situation, he could only fight with his life on the line. If he could escape, he would escape. If not, there was nothing he could do. After all, he had already come this far, and there was no way to retreat. The red armored soldier crossed his arms in front of his chest, and the red chains wrapped around his body made an ear-piercing sound. He sneered and said, "Why? You don't dare to. You win." Yu Qianqiu said ruthlessly. He took out the Emperor of the Underworld's token and flew up to the roof of the palace. He had wanted to slip back to Utopia and run, but he thought that the Emperor of the Underworld's token was a genuine gift from the Saintess of the Underworld. He could take a gamble. The Emperor of the Underworld couldn't possibly kill him without saying a word, right? It wouldn't be too late to escape if he realized that something was wrong. It wasn't his style to cry until he saw the coffin. Yu Qianqiu flew up to the roof and stood behind the scholar. He held the Emperor of the Underworld's token with both hands and bowed respectfully. Yu Qianqiu of the Immortal World greets the Emperor of the Underworld. Taking advantage of his free time, he glanced down at the foot of the mountain. He realized that the scenery at the foot of the mountain from this angle really made him feel like he was the ruler of the world. Lowering his head, he saw the fair and bare feet standing on the roof slowly turn around without a speck of dust on them. He immediately understood that the Supreme of the Underworld was sizing him up. His heart immediately thumped non-stop, and many past events flashed through his mind. Yan Zicheng met Lu Chongqing, the head of the Ong Kwangsung sect, and joined the Ong Kwangsung sect. He became a small disciple who was ridiculed. Later, his master died, and he was framed. After experiencing a series of events, he escaped with his life. After hiding outside for a long time and experiencing some things, he joined the #1 sect in the cultivation world, Fuxian Island. He was expelled from the sect and was hunted by various sections. Then, he became the disciple of the #1 expert in the world, Bai Changchun, until he took charge of the demon domain and became the #1 expert in the human world. Finally, he founded the World Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. He had been through countless life and death situations along the way. In the past, he would never have dreamed that he would one day be able to stand face to face with the legendary Emperor of the Underworld in the Three Realms. He was able to achieve what he had today by walking step by step. He had experienced life and death so many times, what was there to be afraid of? He gritted his teeth and slowly raised his head to meet the gaze that was staring at him. What entered his eyes was a refined and handsome face with a slight smile. It was completely different from the sinister Emperor of the Underworld he had dreamed of. He couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Was this person really the Emperor of the Underworld who could make the Three Realms tremble? The scholar was also sizing up Yu Qianqiu carefully. He wanted to see what kind of person the Saintess of the Underworld was talking about was. When he saw that there was no trace of fear in the other party's eyes when he raised his head to look at him, he couldn't help but nod slightly in his heart. Indeed, there was something extraordinary about an extraordinary person. It was rare for a cultivator with the cultivation of a minor immortal to not be afraid when he saw him. What he didn't know was that Yu Qianqiu didn't even have the courage to raise his head to look at him. He only managed to raise his head after a torment in his heart. If he had looked at him with a murderous intent, it would be strange if Yu Qianqiu wasn't afraid. Perhaps he wouldn't even be able to see Yu Qianqiu's figure right now. Most importantly, he came with good intentions. That smile on his face was so harmless, and he looked refined and handsome. Women would rush up and kiss him when they saw him. Who would be afraid? Yu Qianqiu. This is the second time we've met. The scholar was the first to speak with a slight smile. It was the first time for Tsangyan Axayan and Xinyu to meet the Emperor of the Underworld. They didn't expect him to be such a handsome young man with such an amiable smile. It was truly beyond their expectations. Subconsciously, they felt a lot more at ease. Seeing that the Emperor of the Underworld had spoken, they couldn't hear a single word clearly. They guessed that there might be some sort of soundproofing barrier set up on the roof. The red-armored soldier was also stunned. He had never seen the Emperor of the Underworld being so amiable to a foreign cultivator, especially a celestial cultivator. Under normal circumstances, the Emperor of the Underworld would maintain at least some dignity in front of outsiders. He wouldn't act like this. Of course, based on his understanding of the Emperor of the Underworld, it would be a different story if he saw a beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu's brain worked quickly. However, he was at a loss for a long time. He couldn't remember when he had seen the Emperor of the Underworld, who was renowned throughout the 3 realms. He had a splitting headache, but he still couldn't remember. His memory couldn't be that bad, right? How could he forget someone like the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi? For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. The Emperor of the Underworld said that they had met before. Could he say that he remembered wrongly? This junior is ignorant. I really can't remember when I've seen you before. Yu Qianqiu said with a toothache. He was afraid that the Emperor of the Underworld was testing him. He also didn't know what the Emperor of the Underworld's temper was like. Was he a smiling tiger? He could only stiffen his neck and wait for the situation. The scholar smiled faintly and said, "That's true. I could see you in front of the dragon transformation gate. With your cultivation, you can't see me." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. So he was referring to that time. Suddenly, he felt the weight in his hands lighten. The Emperor of the Underworld's token had already floated to the Emperor of the Underworld's hand. His heart jumped, and he was prepared to escape at any time. Below, Tsangyan Axayan and Shin Yu's expressions changed drastically. They were probably all done for this time. The scholar looked at the token over and over again and said faintly, "I personally carved the Emperor of the Underworld's token. There are only 2 sides. One side is on me, and I'm prepared to use it to pass down orders at any time. The other side is given to the Underworld Saintess for protection." When the Underworld Saintess told me that she gave the Underworld's token to you, I was a little surprised. Yu Qianqiu was surprised. Did the Underworld Saintess tell you that she gave the Underworld's token to me? No matter how he listened to it, he felt that something was wrong. The Underworld Saintess had obviously given the token to Yu Ji, and it had nothing to do with him. How could he not understand the words of an expert? The scholar nodded slightly and said, "She was trapped in the human world for a long time. She said that when she returned to the underworld, she realized that she was fated to meet you, so she gave this token to you. However, she didn't tell you that she gave you the token of the underworld." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He slowly tilted his head to look at the rising red fog, a puzzled expression on his face. He believed that the Emperor of the Underworld had no need to lie to him. However, why did the Underworld Saintess say something that distorted the truth? From what the scholar had said, it seemed that the Underworld Saintess had intentionally concealed the fact that he was from the human world. Could it be that she was trying to protect him? But why was that? Could it be that she had fallen in love with him at first sight? But it seemed that his current appearance was not good enough for a woman to fall in love with him at first sight. Not long after the Underworld Saintess told me this, Jintai suddenly came to the royal palace of the underworld and asked me why I gave you the underworld's token. The scholar immediately told Yu Qianqiu what he had told Jintai that day. This was the reason why he didn't care about his status as the Emperor of the Underworld and asked someone to trick Yu Qianqiu into meeting him. He wanted to let Yu Qianqiu know that he had helped him before, so that Yu Qianqiu would remember this big favor. What the hell were they doing? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head in confusion. He was no longer nervous, but he said with a wry smile, "Emperor of the Underworld. This junior can't figure out why you helped me like this. It seems that this junior's ability is not worthy of your kindness. It's right that you can't figure it out. If I could figure it out, then I, the Emperor of the Underworld, would be too despicable to come here and curry favor with you." The scholar immediately laughed heartily. His thin white robe wrapped tightly around his body in the wind, giving him a feeling that he was floating in the air. He appeared to be exceptionally elegant and refined. This surprised Sangyin Aksayan, Jiu, and the red-armored soldiers below, not knowing why the emperor of the underworld was so happy. He waved his hand disapprovingly, saying, "You are too serious. It's not a kindness. Since the underworld saintess thinks so highly of you, how can I undermine her? Naturally, I have to do my best to help you. Otherwise, as an immortal, you dared to use my underworld emperor's token to show off outside, let alone help you block Jintai. Do you really think you can avoid my eyes and ears by hiding in the underworld river? Once I give the order, how can the water tribe of the underworld not give me face? If I want to deal with you, I can make it difficult for you to move an inch in the underworld river at any time. If I want to catch you, it will be a piece of cake. Do you think you can hide until today?" As he spoke, he laughed coldly and said, "Actually, your movements in the netherworld river have always been within my grasp. It's just a matter of time and place for me to catch you. Otherwise, why do you think the Purgatory Army coincidentally intercepted you in the netherworld river? Do you really think you are catching a fugitive from the endless horizon? It's because I happened to come here for something." Thinking that the underworld saintess thinks so highly of you, I can't help but want to see why she thinks so highly of you. So, I asked the soldiers to intercept you and bring you here. Do you think I can see just anyone? Although what he said was half true, the domineering aura of the Supreme Emperor of the underworld was undoubtedly revealed in his words. He behaved like an emperor, using both kindness and power. It was enough to fool Yu Qianqiu without his knowledge. Yu Qianqiu wouldn't expect that the emperor of the underworld came here on purpose for him. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu blushed with shame. He realized that the three of them had indeed thought too simply, thinking that they could avoid being caught by the emperor of the underworld by hiding in the water. Since the emperor of the underworld had been in charge of the underworld for so many years, his relationship with the water tribe of the underworld river was naturally not bad. If he, the emperor of the underworld, asked the water tribe of the underworld river for him, how could they not give face to the emperor of the underworld for the sake of an insignificant celestial cultivator like him? It was guaranteed that a large group of people would surround and intercept him. I felt that there was something fishy about being intercepted in the underworld river. So that's what happened. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and rubbed his nose. He cupped his hands and said, "I wonder how the emperor of the underworld is going to deal with us now. If I really wanted to deal with you, I wouldn't be meeting you here. Zhang Jun would have already killed you." Based on Zhang Jun's ability, the 3-in-1 sword-drawing style of the Heartless Palace would not be able to stop him, unless Wang Qing himself used it. That Grey Cloud Xian is still not good enough. The scholar waved his hand and the token of the Emperor of the Underworld landed in Yu Qianqiu's hand. He smiled faintly and said, "Since the Saintess has already given it to you, I have no reason to take it back. The Saintess has given you benefits, so I naturally can't be too stingy. In the future, you can use this token to come to the Underworld Royal Palace to see me at any time. I will allow you to use the token of the Emperor of the Underworld to solve any problems you encounter in the Underworld. What do you think? The benefits I have given you won't be any worse than the Saintess's, right?" Ah! Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He had never dreamed that this would be the outcome. He didn't dare to believe that this was real. Could it be that there was such a thing as a free lunch in this world? He quickly calmed down. He didn't believe that there was such a good thing. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your favor, Emperor of the Underworld. What does Emperor of the Underworld need this junior to do?" With the scholar's insight and experience, he could naturally tell what Jiang Yi was thinking. He smiled coldly and said, "Do you think that I am making a deal with you? In the 3 realms, if I want to do something, I only need to say the word and someone will do it. If I want something, someone will naturally deliver it to me. Do you think that with your current ability, you are qualified to be ordered around by me. I am only helping you because I am happy. Don't think too highly of yourself. Damn it. You don't have to be so direct. You should at least give me some face. Yu Qianqiu stood there awkwardly. When he thought about it, he felt that the scholar was right. The scholar didn't have anything he wanted, and his subordinates were as many as the clouds. He also had countless subordinates. Whatever he wanted to do, he could settle it with just a word. Yu Qianqiu really wasn't qualified to be ordered around by the scholar. It seemed like he was indeed thinking too much. Seeing that Jiang Yi had already been convinced by him, the scholar felt it was funny. However, on the surface, he asked calmly, "Let me ask you. What are you doing here instead of cultivating and improving your own cultivation?" Yu Qianqiu immediately smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, this junior was forced to do so." Just as the underworld saint said, this junior didn't know that this was the underworld token. When I took it out, even I was shocked, thinking that I had gotten into trouble. To tell you the truth, Emperor of the Underworld, the few of us fled here for our lives. He wanted to say that he was here to collect information, but he reckoned that he wouldn't be able to fool the other party. He might as well just admit that he was a coward. Humph. You are just an ignorant junior. I don't have time to waste on you. The scholar waved his hand and retracted the soundproof barrier. He then said calmly to the people below, "John Jun. Let them go." After saying this, he disappeared from the roof. A streak of white light moved as fast as lightning, disappearing into the distant horizon in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1056. Seeing the Emperor of the Underworld fly away, Yu Qianqiu felt depressed. He had wanted to strike while the iron was hot and form a relationship with the Emperor of the Underworld. Who would have thought that the Emperor of the Underworld would leave without any warning? Little did he know that the Emperor of the Underworld would shamelessly come here to express his goodwill. For someone who was used to being in a superior position, it was already very awkward. Although he still maintained his demeanor on the surface, he was extremely embarrassed and did not have the face to stay here any longer. Hearing that the Emperor of the Underworld would let them go, Zhangyan Axayan and Xin Yu were overjoyed. They did not know what Yu Qianqiu had said to the Emperor of the Underworld to let them pass safely. The red-armored soldier also looked at Yu Qianqiu with a puzzled expression. He also wanted to know what the Emperor of the Underworld had said to Yu Qianqiu, but it was not convenient for him to ask about the Emperor of the Underworld. He could only snort coldly and say, "You guys are lucky today. Get out." Yu Qianqiu stood on the roof and looked at the red-armored soldier below. He still felt like he was dreaming. He did not expect to see the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, under such circumstances. He did not expect Bai Qi to reward him. It was too unexpected. Hearing Zhang Jun telling them to scram, Yu Qianqiu looked towards the distance where the red light filled the sky. He casually took out his flying shuttle and jumped on it. Grey Cloud Axayan and Xin Yu understood his intention and flashed up. The three of them saluted the red-armored soldiers below. Afterwards, Ash Cloud Axayan took over the flying shuttle without any complaints and quickly drove it away. Standing on the square above the sea of lava, the red-armored soldier looked in the direction they were going. His eyes were filled with confusion. He mumbled to himself, "They are going there. Did the Emperor of the Underworld give them a mission?" The flying shuttle flew across the sky. Below them was still the sea of lava. The screams from time to time could no longer attract the attention of the three people above. Zhangyan Axayan stood at the front of the flying shuttle. After a while, he could not help but ask, "Yu Qianqiu, is the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in your hand real?" "Of course it's fake. But if the Underworld Emperor says it's real, then it's real." Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief and said, "It's all good now. We can use the endless horizon to directly enter the mysterious forbidden area. There shouldn't be any danger on this trip." This was not what Grey Cloud Exian wanted to hear. He was shocked to see the Underworld Emperor safe and sound. After a moment of silence, he asked again, "What did the Underworld Emperor tell you?" "Old song. This is related to the Emperor of the Underworld, so it's really inconvenient to divulge it." "Please excuse me," Yu Qianqiu said with a perfunctory chuckle. Grey Cloud Exian's face twitched, and he shut up. Shen Yu sat alone at the back of the flying shuttle. He did not look too good, and he seemed to be in low spirits. It seemed that meditating was indeed not suitable for him to stay in the endless horizon. Even though they were flying in the sky far away from the ground, the temperature was still like a furnace, making him feel a little unbearable. However, this fellow had no human rights and could only endure it. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu discovered it in time. He asked Grey Cloud Exian to change his original flight path and fly horizontally above the Netherworld River Basin. They continued to fly along the Netherworld River Basin, which made Shen Yu feel better. Time passed day by day as they flew endlessly. Yu Qianqiu was bored, and he would occasionally drop one of the silver balls he was playing with into the Nether River Basin below. As time passed, the two sides of the Netherworld River, which were sometimes wide and sometimes narrow, gradually drew closer. They could no longer see the vast and boundless water surface of the Netherworld River. Until one day, the sea of lava on both sides of the Netherworld River was suddenly left behind them. A cool breeze blew past them. Yu Qianqiu stood on the flying shuttle and waved his hands behind him as he cheered, "We've finally flown out of the endless horizon." Grey Cloud Exian's slightly tired face finally revealed a hint of relief. They had been flying at high speed for almost 2 months without stopping for a moment. Even though he had a high cultivation base, he still felt that it was a little too much. At the same time, he could not help but sigh. The vastness of the Netherworld had exceeded his expectations. Don't be too happy too early. There's at most 1 more month before the Celestial Emperor's wedding. Even if we return now, we won't make it in time. Qin Yun Exian coldly looked at Yu Qianqiu and reminded him. In fact, he had already reminded him countless times along the way. However, Yu Qianqiu was determined to continue forward. Yu Qianqiu told him not to meddle in other people's business and said that he had a way to return in time. Grey Cloud Exian thought that Dijiu would not disregard his own life, so he waited to see how Dijiu would return in time. Hearing his words, Yu Qianqiu was about to repeat the same old story, but he saw Ji Yu walking to the front of the flying shuttle in a daze. He inserted himself in front of Grey Cloud Exian, who was frowning, and slowly knelt down. He faced the cool night wind and began to cry. His tears flowed down his face. Yu Qianqiu walked forward and exchanged glances with Grey Cloud Exian. They both felt a little strange. Then, they heard Ji Yu choking on his sobs and muttering to himself, "I'm back. After 150,000 years. I'm finally back." Although the voice was soft, the two of them could hear it clearly at such a close distance. Surprised, they couldn't help but look at their surroundings. The two sides of the Netherworld River were empty plains that were like the Gobi Desert. Not a single undulation could be seen, and the Netherworld River below them was at most 100 meters wide. "Ji Yu. You used to cultivate here?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. Ji Yu was shocked and realized that he had lost his composure. He panicked and suddenly remembered something. He suddenly stood up and shouted at the two of them, "Slow down. Slow down, it's very dangerous here." Not only did he slow down, Grey Cloud Exian directly stopped the flying shuttle in the air. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Ji Yu. What's going on?" This area is the isolation zone between the Netherworld and the mysterious Forbidden Area. Don't think that it's peaceful here. In fact, it's full of danger. The invisible and mysterious power that can tear everything apart can appear in the air at any time. It's very powerful. Even the immortal emperor of the immortal world and the netherworld emperor of the netherworld don't dare to trespass here. Jiyu pointed at the netherworld river in front and below. In this isolation zone, whether it's on land or in the water, even underground, there are no living creatures. It's because they can't survive the invisible and mysterious power. Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Axion looked at each other. No wonder no one dared to trespass the forbidden area of the netherworld. It was because of this reason. However, the two of them had suspicions in their eyes. Yu Qianqiu touched his chin and sneered. Jiyu. Do you think the two of us are fools or idiots? Since no living creatures can survive here, why were you able to cultivate here in the past? You should be punished. Grey Cloud Axion stared at Jiyu and shouted coldly. Looks like we can't let him live anymore. Otherwise, who knows what traps are waiting for us ahead. After all, we're not familiar with this place at all. Yu Qianqiu frowned and looked at Jiyu, but he didn't object. Jiyu looked at the two of them and smiled bitterly. I won't hide it from you now. Actually, you've misunderstood. This isn't the place where I cultivated in the past. As he said that, he raised his hand and pointed ahead along the netherworld river. He sighed. Follow this netherworld river straight ahead. With Elder Tsang's flying speed, it won't take more than a day for you to see a waterfall that flows down from a tall mountain. I came down from that waterfall back then. As long as we cross that tall mountain, we'll reach the legendary forbidden area of the netherworld. And I am from the so-called mysterious forbidden area of the netherworld. Yu Qianqiu and Sangyin Axian were stunned. Both of them had suspected that this fellow was hiding some sort of secret, but none of them had imagined that this fellow's origins would be so strange. He was actually from the mysterious netherworld forbidden area, and it was too inconceivable. Grey Cloud Axian's throat moved, and he said with some difficulty in a threatening tone, You're not lying to us, are you? There's no need. I want to go back alive, so there's no need to lie to you. There was a trace of nostalgia hidden in Zhou Yu's lonely expression. He looked ahead and sighed faintly. More than 1,000,000 years ago, I was born in a lake there. I was ignorant and carefree. Only after 500,000 years did my spiritual wisdom appear. Another 500,000 years later, I was lucky enough to find the way of cultivation. It only took me 50,000 years to cultivate to the early stage of Underworld Lord. Just when I broke through to the early stage of Netherworld Venerable, which was 150,000 years ago, I was suddenly possessed and wanted to see the outside world. Therefore, I followed the small river that connected the lake and finally stood on the waterfall. I hesitated for a long time, but in the end, I couldn't help but go with the flow. In the end, I came to the so-called Netherworld River. Who knew that the outside world was extremely dangerous? It was the first time I met the water tribe in the Netherworld River. They wanted to take my life because of a disagreement. I was so scared that I fled in a panic. I ran far away before I got out of danger. After that, I didn't want to stay outside anymore. I wanted to go back to where I left. But my fate was really full of misfortune. Every time I wanted to go back the way I came, I would always encounter some dangerous things. It was as if God was playing a joke on me. It worked every time. Not only did I fail to come back, but I was also getting further and further away from where I wanted to go. Just like that, I spent 150,000 years in the river Styx with nowhere to go. I thought that I would never be able to return in this lifetime. I left home so far away and experienced so many dangers. I no longer had the courage to return because I was too scared to try again. Until I met you too. It was the first time I had the courage to taste the flesh of a human in the immortal world. Who knew that I was as unlucky as ever? You know what happened next. I never dreamed that I would be able to come back here in this lifetime. There was such an unlucky guy in this world. Yu Qianqiu and Sangyin Axian looked at each other. While they felt it was unbelievable, they also sighed for Ji-Yu's fate. Sungyun Aksayan looked ahead and asked with a frown, I don't know what's so mysterious about this netherworld forbidden land. Ji-Yu. What's in the forbidden land? This. Ji-Yu hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly. They guarded the mausoleum of the gods they were loyal to and generally did not care about others. As long as we know our place and do not trespass into the area they were guarding, nothing will happen. So that's how it is. Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and looked around before asking, you said that Jin Tai and Bai Qi did not dare to trespass this isolation zone with their cultivation, but you, a mere underworld supremacy, can come and go as you please. Is there a secret passage here? There's no secret passage. Zhou Yu pondered and shook his head. Actually, I don't know the reason either. Others would be crushed to pieces by that mysterious power here, but when I encounter that mysterious power, it always turns from majestic to gentle, like a gentle breeze brushing past me. I still can't figure out why. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that I was born inside and the people inside. There was such a strange thing. The two people beside him looked at each other and looked at Xinyu suspiciously, as if they wanted to see something different about him. However, they were not that observant. After a moment of silence, Yu Qianzhou waved at Xinyu and said, Bring me in. Wait. Songyun Aksayan shouted and stared at Yu Qianzhou. He snorted and said, Once you remove the restriction on him inside, you will no longer be able to restrain him. Even if there's no danger inside, have you thought about how you're going to pass through this isolation zone when you come back? I'm afraid you'll never be able to come back. He had no choice but to be careful. Now that Yu Qianzhou's life was related to his life, the immortal palace might even find an excuse to attack the passionless palace. Even if he could hide in the netherworld and not go back, ignoring the existence of the heartless palace, if the heartless palace was really destroyed, he, Grey Cloud Aksayan, would lose his backing to deter others. It would be very difficult for him to survive in the netherworld alone. At the same time, the immortal palace would not allow him to hide in the netherworld and live comfortably. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He did not think about this at all because it was not a problem for him at all. He could leave whenever he wanted to. Xinyu smiled bitterly and said, Then what does Mr. Tsang want? Send us out safely and then let him remove the restriction on you. Songyun Aksayan narrowed his eyes. Us? Yu Qianzhou was stunned again. Didn't you say you wouldn't go in? Songyun Aksayan looked around, then glanced at him and said, Since there is no danger inside and it's a rare opportunity to see the mausoleum of the god of sin, why not go in and have a look? He said this against his will. In fact, he did not want to go in at all, but he did not have the courage to stay in this damn place alone. Who knew if he would run into that mysterious power? Moreover, he did not know when Yu Qianzhou would come back. It should be known that the longer he stayed, the more likely it was that he would run into it. If he did not wait for Yu Qianzhou to come out, he did not dare to go back alone. He did not dare to believe that the three of them could make it all the way here. At least, he was not confident that he could return the way he came from. All along the way, Yu Qianzhou had repeatedly turned danger into safety, causing him to feel that it was safer to be by Yu Qianzhou's side. In short, in the end, it was a fact that he wasn't willing to admit. He was afraid. What if after I send you out, you don't help me remove the restriction in my body? Zhou Yu said with a bitter face. He could not help but worry. What if these two fellows saw that he could enter and exit the forbidden area at will and wanted to take him as their exclusive property? That was a very likely possibility. Songyun Aksayan immediately sneered and said, You have no choice. You have to agree whether you want to or not. Otherwise, I will make it so that you will never be able to go back. Yu Qianzhou looked at him in pain. This was clearly a threat. If he did not agree, he would kill him. Jiu Yu looked helpless. He really had no choice but to resign himself to fate. He said sadly, "I agree." His goal was achieved. Songyun Xan snorted and did not speak. Yu Qianqiu patted Jiu Yu's shoulder and comforted him, "Don't worry. I, Yu Qianqiu, am a man of my word. Before I leave this place, I will remove the restriction in your body and let you go back safely. What do we do now?" In fact, this place was more difficult than ascending to heaven for others, but it was not a problem for Jiu Yu. He asked Yu Qianqiu to put away the flying shuttle and revealed his true form again. He opened his clamshell and wrapped the two of them inside. Then, he dove into the river Styx below and continued to move quickly along the river Styx. In less than half an hour, Jiu Yu, who was moving quickly in the water, constantly felt the mysterious and terrifying power crushing and tearing at him. From time to time, his huge clamshell would shine with a gorgeous light. Whenever the mysterious and terrifying power encountered the light, it would slip past his body. The further they went, the more frequent the mysterious power appeared. As they encountered it more frequently, the faint light on Jiu Yu's body flickered non-stop. In the end, the light on his body was like a lamp that would never be extinguished. It was obvious that the mysterious power had completely filled this space. It was impossible to sneak past it. 3 days. With Songyun Xan's cultivation, driving the flying shuttle would not take more than a day. However, Jiu Yu took a full 3 days. In front of them, a 1,000-meter-tall mountain appeared. The entire mountain extended endlessly to the left and right like a tall great wall. The mountain faced the river Styx, and there was a huge waterfall that looked like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. From the top of the mountain, one could hear the loud sound of water falling. The water of the river Styx came from it. Jiu Yu, who was rapidly approaching, shot out of the huge pool that the waterfall created at the foot of the mountain. He went against the flow of the waterfall and soon reached the top of the waterfall. From below, it looked like a mountain, but when he reached the top, he saw a plain with a river flowing on it. "We're here. You can come out now." Jiu Yu's voice was very excited. He slowly floated out of the water and opened his huge clamshell. After 2 figures flashed to the shore, he also turned into his human form and went to the shore. The sound of flowing water came from beside the 3 of them. The waterfall was not far from their feet. Jiu Yu knelt on the ground and covered his face with his hands as he sobbed, "I'm really back." Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xan, on the other hand, looked at their surroundings, dumbfounded. The direction in which the waterfall flowed was like a black curtain falling from the sky. They could vaguely see the mountains and rivers below. It was the netherworld that they had come from. On the mountain, behind them, upstream of the river, with the edge of the mountain as the boundary, there was a strange scene that was clearly separated from the foot of the mountain. Although the mountain and the foot of the mountain both looked like it was night, it was like 2 different worlds. The night at the foot of the mountain was forever immersed in endless darkness, but the night at the top of the mountain was filled with twinkling stars. There was also a bright moon hanging in the night sky. The white moonlight shone on the ground like mercury, allowing everything to be seen clearly. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xan's mouths were wide open as they looked up at the bright moon in the sky. This moon was not like the moon they had seen in the mortal world or the immortal world. It was dozens or even hundreds of times bigger than the moon they had seen before. The huge moon hanging in the sky was terrifying. Chapter 1058. If one looked closely, they would find that the deep ravines on the moon seemed to be faintly visible. Such a huge moon hanging in the sky gave people the feeling that it would fall at any time. The sound of the waterfall mixed with Ji Yu's joyful cries after his return. Coupled with the sky full of stars and the huge and scary moon, it gave the 2 an inexplicable strange feeling. After a while, Ji recovered from his excitement and slowly stood up, wiping the tears on his face. Yu Qianqiu coughed and pointed at the big moon in the sky. Yu. Is that really the moon in the sky? Of course it's the moon. Yu looked up at the moon and sighed. 150,000 years ago, after I left the mountain, I couldn't get used to not seeing the moon in the sky. So when I first met the water tribe of the river Styx, I asked them where the moon was. They thought I was playing with them, so they chased me and tried to kill me. Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but roll his eyes. There are no sun, moon, and stars in the netherworld, let alone such a big moon. You asked them where the moon was in the sky. It would be strange if they didn't think you were playing with them. You deserve to be killed. That's right. Yu sighed. But I've never left this place before, so how would I know there's no moon in the netherworld? Now that I think about it, maybe I ended up like this because I asked about the moon. Otherwise, I would have come back long ago. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He seemed to vaguely remember a saying in his previous life, "It's all the moon's fault." It couldn't be more suitable to be used on this unlucky guy. He patted his shoulder and comforted him. You can't blame yourself for this. It's all the moon's fault. Let bygones be bygones. Now that you're finally back, just treat it as going out to see the world. If you hadn't wandered outside for 150,000 years, how would you know there's no moon in the netherworld? Pfft. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but scoff. He had never seen anyone comforting someone like this. It was no different from provoking someone. Sure enough, Shen Yu's expression twitched as he said, if it takes 150,000 years just to find out if the netherworld has a moon, then I'd rather not know if the netherworld has a moon. If I could cultivate here peacefully for 150,000 years, I might have broken through to the underworld emperor period. Damn it. Then you can slowly regret it. What does it have to do with me? Yu Qianqiu had a feeling that his good intentions had been treated as malicious intent. He pointed to the depths of the plain and asked in annoyance, where should we go next? Yu looked at the flowing river and murmured, I naturally want to go to where I came from, which is the source of this river. Yu Qianqiu looked at the waterfall under his feet. Yu is unlucky because he didn't see the big moon when he left here. I hope you and I won't be unlucky because we came here and saw the big moon. Don't worry. Long live I won't be unlucky. The one who will be unlucky is you. Yu Qianqiu retorted. Gray Cloud Axan snorted and didn't say anything. After spending so much time together, he knew that this guy had a sharp tongue. He would be in the wrong if they continued arguing, so he didn't say anything. Seeing that the two of them had stopped arguing, Shen Yu scratched his head and said, that Bai Changchun's cultivation level is not bad, but it is still far from Bai Qi and Jin Tai's cultivation level. If even the two of them can't come in, then that Bai Changchun can't come in either. Moreover, I heard that he was severely injured by the Emperor of the Netherworld. If I'm not wrong, that Bai Changchun should have died in the quarantine zone, so there is no need to find him. Bullsh *T. Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily. He pointed at Shen Yu and said, you better pray that he is alive. Otherwise, you won't be able to live either. Shen Yu was startled. He exchanged a look with Gray Cloud Xan. He didn't know why this guy suddenly turned on him. Gray Cloud Xan snorted coldly and said, don't bother with him. This guy is a complete lunatic. Don't talk nonsense in front of me. Yu Qianqiu pointed at his head and said with a ferocious expression, Yu is dead. You won't be able to leave this place alive. Just stay here and guard the mausoleum for those dead gods. You must have taken the wrong medicine. Gray Cloud Xian's expression turned cold. He said indifferently, you won't be able to get out even if Yu is dead. I'm warning you, before we leave this place, you better not touch him. Otherwise, I will cut off my way out. Since I can't get out, I will kill you first to avenge my grandson. You can try. Yu Qianqiu said sternly. Grey Cloud Xan immediately retorted, then you can try. Let's see if I dare to kill you or not. The two of them were at each other's throats again. Zhou Yu stood there with a bitter expression. In short, he was the unluckiest one. Even if Grey Cloud Xan killed Yu Qianqiu, he would also be unlucky. He sighed and said, then try your best to find him. If you really can't find him, there's nothing I can do. This finally made Yu Qianqiu feel better. He snorted coldly and said, this is such a big place. Where do we start? How are we going to find him? I don't know which direction Bai Changchun came from. Anyway, he has to jump over this cliff. Let's search along this cliff and ask someone along the way. Zhou Yu said helplessly. Yu Qianqiu looked around and asked suspiciously, who should we ask? The dead in the mausoleum definitely can't speak. Of course, we'll look for the living guarding the mausoleum. Shen Yu looked ahead and said, I remember there are 2 adjacent mausoleums less than half a day from here. I know the people guarding the mausoleum, but I don't know if Grandma Yan is still there. After all, 150,000 years have passed. All right. Yu Qianqiu casually took out his flying artifact, and the 3 of them flashed on it. Then, Yu Qianqiu coughed and said, Old song. Your cultivation is higher, so you should control it. That way, we can save some time. He had just fallen out with the other party, and now he immediately asked for help. He really had to put down his pride. People with thin skin would not be able to do that. Fortunately, Grey Cloud Xan did not want to waste time when the situation was unclear. He snorted coldly and looked at Yu Qianqiu with disdain. In the end, he still took over. Following the direction that Shen Yu pointed, the flying shuttle flew quickly. It took less than half a day for Shen Yu, and even less time for Grey Cloud Xan. In less than 4 hours, a mountain range began to appear under the silver moonlight. Under Shen Yu's guidance, Grey Cloud Xan slowed down and slowly flew toward a mountain that looked like the head of a monster. When they got closer, they could see that what looked like the eyes of 2 monsters were actually 2 bulging tombs. The 2 tombs were made of unknown dark red crystals, and they did not reflect light at all under the moonlight. Each of them was about 100 square meters, and they were less than 10 meters tall. And at the head of the monster mountain, there was a small single-family manor built with local materials and stones. Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xan looked at each other anxiously. After putting away the flying shuttle, Shen Yu flew to the front and said loudly, Is Grandma Yan here? Xiao Su is here to see you. In the silence, there was suddenly an, oh, in the silent stone manner. I was wondering who it was. It's Xiao Su. You haven't been here for many years. I thought you had forgotten about me. Chapter 1059. It was an old woman's voice, calm and indifferent. Soon after, a gray-clothed old woman slowly walked out of the house. Her snow-white hair was tied up behind her head, and her face was covered in wrinkles. However, she was very spirited. She walked into the small courtyard with her back straight. She curiously looked at Yu Qianqiu and Zhangyan Xan, who were in the air. This old woman's cultivation is very high. I can't see through her cultivation. Zhangyan Xan secretly transmitted his voice to Yu Qianqiu. He could tell that she was nervous. Nonsense. She came down from the divine world to guard the tomb. It would be strange if her cultivation was low. Yu Qianqiu replied secretly. Both of them could tell that this woman was not a meditation cultivator. Under Shen Yu's guidance, the 3 of them landed outside the courtyard. They didn't land directly inside as a sign of respect. Once the 3 of them walked into the courtyard, Shen Yu quickly stepped forward and bowed. Xiao Su greets Granny Yan. Yu Qianqiu followed suit and bowed. Yu Qianqiu greets Granny Yan. He was a polite person. He secretly looked at the environment of the courtyard and realized that it was too simple. He guessed that a person with such a state of mind wouldn't be a bad person, so he relaxed a lot. Cangyun Xian's mouth twitched. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu. It didn't seem right for him to stand there alone. Hence, he followed suit and bowed. Cangyun Xian greets Granny Yan. Granny Yan glanced at the two of them and didn't pay much attention to them. She looked at Shen Yu and sighed. Time flies. I don't know how long it has been since I lived here alone. Xiao Su, we haven't seen each other for at least 100,000 years, right? Why did you bring two strangers with you today? Why are you looking for me? Let me make this clear. Even if we are old acquaintances, I won't go out to do anything for you. You should know this. Shen Yu smiled bitterly. I remember Granny's words. You once said that the other tomb guard who lived with you in the past had divined for you. He told you not to go out and get involved with any karma. Otherwise, the tomb will be destroyed and you will die. As long as you remember. At this moment, a smile appeared on Granny Yan's face. She looked at Shen Yu again and said with a smile, you haven't made any progress in your cultivation after so many years. Looks like you've been slacking off. But it's good too. You'll be more at ease with a lower cultivation, and you won't cause any trouble for yourself. The person lying here in eternal sleep is a good example. Shen Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. It's not that I'm slacking off, it's just that I haven't had the chance to cultivate all these years. I've been running for my life, so my cultivation hasn't improved much. Yu Qianqiu and Cangyun Xian stood behind him without saying a word. In fact, there was no room for them to interrupt. Escape. Grandma Yan was slightly taken aback and asked in astonishment, what did you do? Most of the people who are willing to guard the tomb here are people who have gotten rid of all distracting thoughts. Very few people would have the thought of fighting and killing again. Could it be that you have committed a great taboo and touched someone's tomb? Xiao Yu doesn't even know about this taboo. It's really a long story. Shen Yu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, I couldn't help but run out along that river because of a moment of impulse. As a result, I've caused many disasters and haven't found a chance to return. In fact, I've just returned from outside. You can actually pass through the heavenly barrier. How is that possible? Granny Yan let out a breath of cold air. Then, as if it had nothing to do with her, she regained her calmness. However, she seemed to have thought of something and tried to ask, Xiao Su, since you've been outside, have you heard of a girl called Taishu Xian? A girl called Taishu Xian. Shen Yu was stunned. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, I've never heard of her. Who is she? Yu Qianqiu, who was at the side, also thought about it. He had heard of the ancestor of all demons, Taishu Jing, but he was a man. As for Taishu Xian's woman, he had never heard of it. As he thought about it, he tilted his head to look at Cangyun Xian. Coincidentally, Cangyun Xian also looked at him with a questioning look. Both of them immediately understood that no one had heard of her. She's the girl who lived with me and guarded the tomb together. Forget it. Since you don't know, forget it. Grandma Yan waved her hand and glanced at the other two. Xiao Yu, why did you bring two strangers to me? Shen Yu was afraid of causing a misunderstanding, so he immediately cupped his hands and said, they are my friends. We're looking for someone, and we're here to ask Grandma about this person. Then you found the wrong person. Grandma Yan shook her head and said, I rarely leave this mountain and almost never go out. I've cut off any contact with the outside world. How would I know the person you're looking for? As soon as she said that, Yu Qianqiu's face darkened slightly. Shinyu glanced at him and asked with a last glimmer of hope, "The person we're looking for also broke in from the outside?" It shouldn't have been too long since he broke in. With Grandma's cultivation, you should be able to sense if someone passed by here. Could it be? I'll naturally tell you if I know. Grandma Yen raised her hand and interrupted him. I haven't spoken so much for a long time. I'm not used to it. She suddenly paused and frowned, the person who broke in from the outside not long ago. She seemed to have thought of something. Yu Qianqiu immediately became excited, but Grey Cloud Xin secretly transmitted a voice message to stop him. Yu Qianqiu, don't interrupt. Grandma Yan's cultivation is unfathomable, and she doesn't seem to be interested in us. Don't annoy her. Let Shinyu take his time. There's no hurry. Yu Qianqiu thought about it and held back. That's right. Shinyu said excitedly, Grandma, do you remember? It's been a long time since I've thought about things. My brain isn't working well. However, Xiaoyu reminded me of something. Grandma Yen pondered and said slowly, not long ago, old man Meng, who was guarding the tomb in the south, suddenly came to me angrily and asked me if I had seen an old man in a green robe. I asked him what was going on, and he said that he met an old man in a green robe not long ago. The old man passed by and asked him where this place was. After he told the old man the truth, who knew that the old man would bite the hand that fed him and set his eyes on his master's tomb. He said that he wanted to see how the god buried in the tomb was different from ordinary people. As a result, he angered old man Meng, and the two of them fought. The old man was only at the intermediate immortal emperor stage, while old man Meng was at the early minor god stage. Of course, the old man was no match for old man Meng, but he was quite good at escaping. Under old man Meng's pursuit, the old man managed to escape into the barrier of heavens. Yu Qianqiu's heart was pounding when he heard this. He thought that it must be that old man. Other than old man Bai, who else would dare to dig up the god's tomb to see what the dead god looked like? In addition to the green robe and the ability to escape, it must be old man Bai. He's still alive. I told you that he wouldn't die so easily. Yu Qianqiu was excited. Zhang Yunxin had also heard of the appearance of the person who challenged the emperor of the underworld. It was an old man in a green robe. Now that he heard Granny Yan's words, he could roughly guess that it was the Bai Changchun that Yu Qianqiu was looking for. He didn't expect that the guy who had been seriously injured by the emperor of the underworld was still alive, and he was as arrogant as ever. He even wanted to dig up the tomb of the god of sin in front of the tomb keeper whose cultivation was obviously higher than his, knowing that it was the tomb of the god of sin. Wasn't he looking for a fight? Madman. That guy was definitely a complete madman. Of course, Shinyu had also heard of the Bai Changchun who caused a stir in the netherworld. He knew that he was the person he was looking for. When he heard that Bai Changchun was still alive, he immediately asked, Granny. You mean that the person entered the all-heavens boundary and returned to the outside world? Granny Yen shook her head slightly and said, Old Meng also thought that the guy knew that he was no match for him and escaped. Who knew that when old Meng came back from a trip, he suddenly found that the man in the green robe came back again?